We begin tonight in Massachusetts, where the defense in Lindsay Clancy's murder trial rested its case. The 36-year-old has admitted to killing her 3 children in 2023, but Clancy has pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder because she says she was experiencing postpartum psychosis at the time.
Once you got inside the home?
I started taking my boots off.
Was there anything you noticed?
Yeah, the house is really quiet.
Is that unusual?
Yeah.
Something doesn't add up, not in the way you think. While the world watches Lindsay Clancy's trial unfold in a Massachusetts courtroom, a second story has been building in silence, on phones, in comment sections, in TikTok videos stitched together at 2 in the morning. A 911 call no one outside that courtroom has ever heard, a locked bedroom door, a 25-minute window nobody can fully account for, a marriage that ended right after. And now, hundreds of thousands of people online are asking a question that has nothing to do with what happens in that jury room. They're asking about the one person in this entire case who was never charged with anything at all. His name is Patrick Clancy. And right now, whether he likes it or not, he has become the center of one of the fastest-growing true crime conspiracy theories in the country. This is the story of how that happened, not the trial, not the verdict. The theory itself, where it came from, who's spreading it, what they think they found, and why, according to the people who study this exact kind of thing for a living. It might never actually go away, no matter what the evidence says. You've probably followed at least some of the actual trial, the live-streamed testimony, the tearful moments on the stand, the dueling forensic psychiatrists, each trying to convince 18 jurors of a completely different version of what was happening inside Lindsay Clancy's mind on the worst night of her life. What you may not have fully clocked is the second, parallel conversation happening just beneath all of that official coverage. One with its own cast of characters, its own timeline, and its own villain, who has never sat at the defense table and never been questioned as a suspect. You already know the outline. In January of 2023, 3 children died inside a home in Duxbury, Massachusetts. Cora was 5, Dawson was 3, Callan was 8 months old. Their mother, Lindsay Clancy, a labor and delivery nurse, has never denied that she was the one who caused their deaths. Her trial isn't about whether it happened. It's about why, whether a mind gripped by postpartum psychosis can be held criminally responsible for what it does while it's breaking. That's the case the jury is deciding. That is not the case the internet is deciding.
Clancy's defense argues that she should not be held criminally responsible for the deaths because she was suffering from postpartum psychosis.
Because somewhere in the last several weeks, as millions of people tuned into live-streamed testimony, cross-examinations, and expert psychiatric evaluations, a separate current started running underneath all of it. A current that has nothing to do with postpartum psychosis, nothing to do with insanity defenses, and everything to do with one man who was not in that house when it happened. Here's where the theory begins. On the night of January 24th, 2023, Patrick Clancy left his home to run 2 errands, picking up takeout food and stopping at a CVS pharmacy. According to the original police warrant, he was gone for approximately 25 minutes. 25 minutes. That's the number you'll see repeated over and over in TikTok comment sections and long-form breakdowns just like this one. Theorists ask the same questions again and again. Why that specific window? Why did he leave right then? What if the timing wasn't a coincidence at all? What almost none of those videos mention is that cell phone records and surveillance footage were reviewed by investigators, specifically to establish where Patrick was during that window. According to multiple news outlets that have covered this case closely, That evidence places him outside the home the entire time. We'll come back to that. Because right now, the theory isn't interested in what the evidence says. It's interested in what feels unresolved. The second piece of the theory is the locked door. According to the original police warrant, when Patrick returned home that night, he went upstairs and found his bedroom door locked. When he got inside, he discovered blood and the window was open. He ran downstairs and outside, where he found Lindsay on the ground. For true crime audiences, a locked door raises the hair on the back of your neck. Who locks a door in a moment like that? Online, this detail gets replayed constantly, often presented as though it's a smoking gun rather than a single data point, buried inside dozens of pages of forensic reporting. A locked door on its own proves nothing except that a door was locked. It doesn't tell you who locked it or why, and it certainly doesn't tell you someone other than Lindsay Clancy was involved. Still, once you know a detail like that exists, it's almost impossible to unknow it. And that's exactly the space this theory lives in. Here's the piece of evidence doing more work than any other single fact in this theory: the 911 call. Patrick Clancy called 911 that night. According to reporting from the Boston Globe, that call was so graphic and emotionally raw that the presiding judge banned its public release entirely. The only people who have ever heard it are those physically present inside the courtroom. For an audience trained to expect access to everything, that silence is deafening. Some online creators have speculated about what might be on the call, speculation based on nothing except the fact that it exists, and the public can't hear it. But sealing a call doesn't mean there's something incriminating on it. Courts restrict access to graphic evidence for reasons that have nothing to do with guilt, protecting a jury from being unfairly swayed by raw emotion, preserving dignity, preventing exactly the kind of viral clip mining that's defined so much of this trial's online life. A judge deciding the public shouldn't hear a father's most horrifying moment is not the same as hiding evidence of a crime. But try explaining that to an algorithm that rewards mystery over nuance. This theory caught fire when Patrick Clancy took the stand as the prosecution's first witness. He described in detail how his wife's stress, anxiety, and mental health intensified after their third child was born. For most watching, his testimony was heartbreaking, a husband describing the unraveling of the person he loved. For another segment of the audience, something about it didn't sit right. Online, creators describe his testimony as raising more questions than answers. It's a vague phrase doing a lot of heavy lifting. Nobody points to a specific lie or verified inconsistency. What they point to is a feeling that his demeanor didn't match what they expected from a grieving father. That feeling, amplified across thousands of videos, became the seed of everything that followed. What's happened since doesn't look like the conspiracy culture of even 5 years ago. According to reporting from Slate, the people driving this movement are, in many cases, women with no prior history of posting true crime content at all, ordinary users suddenly going semi-viral by watching hours of trial footage and posting their own theories. They call themselves forensics influencers. Search this case on TikTok, and you'll find an endless scroll of amateur timelines, slowed-down analysis of Patrick's facial expressions, side-by-side comparisons of testimony that supposedly doesn't add up. One quote reported by CNN captures the tone. "I do not believe that Lindsay Clancy committed these crimes. I fully believe that Patrick convinced her that she did, not that Patrick was involved. That Lindsay didn't do it at all, and Patrick somehow convinced her she had. A claim built on nothing but suspicion, and it went viral anyway." It's worth understanding just how strange the atmosphere surrounding this trial has become, because it helps explain how a theory like this took root so easily. Lindsay's defense attorney, Kevin Reddington, has spent decades representing clients in high-profile Massachusetts cases without seeking the spotlight. Somewhere in the middle of this trial, he became something close to a minor celebrity, mobbed by crowds outside the courthouse, asked for selfies. Told by at least one supporter, she was the president of his fan club. Researchers who study courtroom psychology say the likability of an attorney can genuinely shape how a case is received, regardless of the strength of the evidence. This isn't a courtroom being watched with clinical detachment. It's being watched the way people watch reality television, with favorites and villains and a hunger for a satisfying story arc. And in a story that desperately needs a villain who isn't a mother suffering from psychosis, Patrick Clancy has become an easy, if entirely unsupported, candidate. Patrick and Lindsay have since divorced and Patrick has remarried. For online sleuths, it's been folded in as one more suspicious data point. Why move on so quickly? Doesn't that seem cold? Multiple witnesses described their marriage before the killings as loving and healthy. Patrick himself, per the police warrant, described it as amazing and said they got along great. A divorce and remarriage on their own tell you nothing about guilt. People process catastrophic loss in wildly different ways. Still, it's become part of a pattern that keeps growing regardless of whether any individual thread actually holds weight. Let's lay out plainly what's actually been established. Patrick Clancy has never been named a suspect by Massachusetts State Police, by the Plymouth County District Attorney's Office, or by any agency involved in this case, not at the time of the killings, not in the 2.5 years since, not during the trial. Cell phone records and surveillance footage were reviewed, and according to multiple outlets, that evidence places Patrick outside the home during the window in question. No physical evidence connecting Patrick to the deaths has ever been presented, referenced, or alleged by prosecutors, the defense, or investigators at any point. Prosecutors and Lindsay's defense disagree about almost everything in this case, but on one point they're in complete alignment. Neither side has ever suggested anyone other than Lindsay Clancy was responsible for what happened inside that home. If there were even a shred of credible evidence implicating Patrick, it would almost certainly be the centerpiece of Lindsay's defense, a far stronger argument than any insanity defense could ever be. It hasn't been introduced, not once. That absence from the one person with the clearest possible motivation to raise it tells you something the viral videos rarely mention. So if the evidence doesn't support it, why is this theory growing instead of shrinking? Researchers who study misinformation say this isn't unusual. A researcher named Wagner, who studies conspiratorial thinking, described what's happening using a specific phrase: a toxic soup for the development of conspiratorial thinking. According to Wagner, it happens when people who have followed a case closely simultaneously don't trust the legal system, don't trust police, and don't trust the media covering it, especially when the outcome they expect isn't the outcome unfolding. Wagner also points to something structural. Most viewers aren't watching full days of testimony. They're watching short, heavily edited TikTok clips stripped of legal context. What tends to go viral, Wagner notes, is content that's highly emotional and often simply not verifiable or true. There's a deeper layer too. Multiple witnesses described Lindsay as a devoted, loving mother, someone who spent her career caring for other people's newborns. That description creates an almost unbearable contradiction. How does a devoted mother do what happened in that house? For a lot of people, the honest answer, that severe untreated psychiatric illness can override even the deepest love a person has ever felt, is simply too disturbing to accept. A conspiracy theory, at its core, is often just an attempt to make an incomprehensible tragedy make sense again. This isn't the first time a case like this has captivated the public this way. 20 years before Lindsay Clancy's trial, a Houston mother named Andrea Yates drowned her 5 children in the family bathtub. She confessed immediately and never denied what she'd done. Her defense argued she was suffering a psychotic break so profound she believed killing her children was the only way to save their souls. Her second trial in 2006 ended with a not guilty by reason of insanity verdict. One of the key experts who evaluated Andrea Yates was forensic psychiatrist Dr. Philip Resnick, the same doctor. Philip Resnick, who became the final witness for Lindsay Clancy's defense, testifying that Clancy was, in his words, clearly psychotic on the day she killed her children. Andrea Yates' case didn't generate a viral conspiracy theory about her husband, social media. As we know, it didn't exist in 2001. But the underlying psychological instinct was the same, a refusal by large segments of the public to accept that a loving mother could do something this catastrophic without some other explanation lurking underneath. It's the exact same struggle playing out today, just with a modern delivery system capable of turning that struggle into a movement with millions of views almost overnight. Andrea Yates wasn't even the only case like this. Just 2 years later, another Texas mother, Deanna Laney, killed her 2 young sons and injured a third, and was also found not guilty by reason of insanity. Cases like these form a pattern researchers who study filicide have documented for years: severe, often undertreated postpartum psychiatric illness, followed by devastating violence, followed by a public reckoning with just how little most people understand about the condition. What's different about the Clancy case isn't the underlying psychiatric story. It's the delivery system. Yates' trial unfolded through newspapers and evening news. Clancy's is unfolding through live streams and algorithm-driven TikTok content, competing for attention in real time. Nima Rahmani, a former federal prosecutor with no connection to this case, spoke publicly about the theories and didn't mince words. He called them dangerous because they distract from the actual legal question at the center of this trial: Lindsay Clancy's criminal responsibility, full stop. There's a real-world cost too, one the videos pushing these theories rarely mention. Patrick Clancy is a private citizen who lost 3 of his children in the most horrific way imaginable, who has never been charged, who has cooperated throughout the investigation, and who has spent 2.5 years grieving in public, whether he wanted to or not. Being made the center of a viral, unfounded theory is not victimless content. It's a real burden placed on a real person who has already lived through the worst thing most people will ever experience. He didn't build a platform or seek attention. Being thrust into the center of a viral accusation, however loosely worded, shapes how strangers see him, what shows up when his name is searched, and follows him into a life he never asked to have publicly dissected. There's a broader question underneath all of this. Why does content like this hold so much power over so many people? A media science professor at Boston University, who has researched how people get drawn into true crime stories online, offered an explanation that applies almost perfectly here. Part of what makes a case like this consuming is that people aren't just watching passively. They're trying to make it fit a familiar shape, trying, in her words, to create a narrative that feels more coherent than the messy, devastating truth actually sitting in front of them. A devoted mother suffering a psychiatric break severe enough to kill her own children doesn't fit neatly into any story we already know how to tell. It's not a monster story. It's not a mystery story. It's a medical tragedy, and medical tragedies rarely satisfy an audience trained on decades of plot twists and third-act reveals. So audiences, often without realizing it, start reshaping the facts into a shape that does satisfy those instincts. A hidden suspect, a cover-up. a 25-minute window that becomes a countdown clock instead of an errand. A sociology professor who studies this exact instinct put it even more simply. Sometimes we cannot fully understand why someone would do something this terrible. And that inability is part of why we can't look away. Speculating about a different suspect can feel psychologically easier than sitting with the harrowing reality of an otherwise loving mother doing something unthinkable during a break from reality. Nobody around her recognized in time. None of this makes the Patrick Clancy theory true. If anything, it explains exactly why it doesn't need to be true to keep spreading. While all of this unfolds online, the actual trial has continued, largely disconnected from the theory consuming so much of the internet's attention. The defense recently rested after calling 10 witnesses, ending on Dr. Philip Resnick, who told jurors Lindsay was clearly psychotic on the day of the killings. Jurors also heard from a hospital chaplain who has met with Lindsay more than 200 times, describing conversations where Lindsay recounted hearing a voice telling her that if she didn't comply, neither she nor her children would be safe. Lindsay's mother testified her daughter was a loving mother who had reported thoughts of harming the children to medical professionals, seeking help. Her former mother-in-law testified she was begging for help. A nanny who worked with the family testified Lindsay appeared to be a warm, attentive mother right up until the killings. A toxicology expert told jurors drug levels in Lindsay's system at the time were actually low, complicating any theory that overmedication alone explained what happened. Diary entries read in court described Lindsay feeling so desperate for a break from caring for 3 young children that her mind, in her words, felt like it was trying to make something physically wrong with her. Prosecutors have pushed back hard, calling rebuttal witnesses and arguing Lindsay planned the killings deliberately. Closing arguments are expected imminently, after which 18 jurors, 12 women, 6 men, must reach a unanimous verdict. None of this, not the testimony, not the closings, not whatever verdict comes down, has anything to do with Patrick Clancy. His name doesn't appear anywhere in the actual legal question this jury has been asked to decide. And that's the strange, uncomfortable reality underneath this entire story. The deeper people dig, hunting for a different explanation, the more that question about Patrick Clancy seems to refuse to go away, not because the evidence keeps pointing toward him, but because the internet has built an ecosystem that rewards asking the question over answering it. Every new piece of testimony gets mined for a new angle. Every silence, like the sealed 911 call, gets filled with speculation instead of fact. The theory doesn't need new evidence to keep growing. It only needs new attention. That's what makes this different from a traditional whodunit. What's actually happening is a real, ongoing tragedy involving 3 dead children becoming raw material for an internet subculture that treats real grief like an unsolved puzzle, complete with clues, timelines, and a villain waiting to be unmasked. So where does that leave the theory itself? Stated plainly, Patrick Clancy has never been charged with a crime. He has never been named a suspect by any investigating agency. Cell phone and surveillance evidence places him outside the home during the exact window theorists point to as suspicious. Neither the prosecution nor Lindsay's own defense team, the one party with every incentive to introduce doubt about who else might be responsible, has ever suggested his involvement. What we're left with, when you strip away the speculation, isn't a hidden second suspect. It's a locked door with an innocent explanation nobody bothered to look for. It's a 25-minute errand run turned into a countdown clock. It's a sealed 911 call that contains, almost certainly, nothing more than the sound of a father discovering the worst thing a parent can discover, sealed not because it hides guilt, but because a judge decided the public didn't need to hear it. and it's a psychological pattern researchers have seen before in case after case, whenever a tragedy is too devastating for people to accept it at face value. A pattern that explains, far better than any locked door or sealed recording ever could, why theories like this take hold in the first place. Lindsay Clancy's trial will end the way trials end, with a verdict decided by 18 people who sat through weeks of testimony the rest of us only saw in fragments. Whatever that verdict is, it will answer the legal question this case was always actually about. It will not answer the question the internet has been asking instead. Because that question was never really about evidence to begin with. If you found this breakdown valuable, take a second to subscribe. It genuinely helps this kind of long-form, fact-checked coverage reach more people, especially in a media environment where misinformation spreads faster than context ever can. Closing arguments are expected any day now, and this case moves into the hands of 18 jurors who have sat through weeks of the most difficult testimony imaginable. We'll be covering the verdict in full when it comes down, along with whatever the online conversation does next, because if this case has taught us anything, it's that the story rarely ends where the courtroom does. Before you go, one final note. This video discussed a theory currently circulating online regarding Patrick Clancy. To be clear, he has never been charged with a crime, has never been named a suspect by investigators, and multiple independent reports indicate that evidence places him outside the home at the time these tragic events occurred. This video does not allege wrongdoing on his part or on the part of anyone else not formally charged in this case. The trial of Lindsay Clancy remains ongoing, and no verdict has been reached. We'll continue to follow this story as it develops.